Hi. Today we are going to have another chat with yet another distinguished old Anandian who happens to be of multifacet. He was one time a cricketer, played for the first XI. Then he spearheaded in corporate world and made certain notable marks as well. Besides all, he is a good music lover and who won some high-level awards at one time as well. So, no doubt, we are going to have a very, very interesting, resourceful and fascinating interview today with this gentleman. And may I take the pleasure and honor in introducing Thilan Wijesinghe, who is going to be the orator for 2022. Okay.
Thank you
Thilan,
very
to
much.
start with, let me start off with some very, very contemporary kind of questions where anybody would ask to get the bringing up from the early days. So, how do you recall your childhood, the parents, and even your other members of the family to start with?
I have very distinct memories of my family's connection to Ananda. My father went to Ananda. He qualified to enter Ananda having had his preliminary education in a small village in Halmilavawa. And he became the first ever civil engineer to be produced by this small village which is close to Bingiriya. Then my uncle, my father's name was Thilan Wijesinghe, so he was considered to be amongst the best civil engineers. Then I had an uncle, my father's first cousin, Dr. B.M.A. Balasurya, who was also an Anandian, who went on to become one of Sri Lanka's best structural engineers. So it was inevitable that with that sort of DNA that I would end up going to Ananda College. And I have absolutely fond memories of the school, and I will always be thankful to both my Bappa, Dr. Balasurya, and my father for having chosen me to attend Ananda College from grade 1 onwards till I finished school in 1979.
So, how do you recall your childhood at this Bingiriya, the village and atmosphere? Because you would have spent a lot of time there with your siblings and with your in-laws and all that. So, how do you recall that?
Every school holiday, literally, we used to go to Halmilavawa, and we used to get together with the village kids and play softball cricket at the Halmilavawa Mahavidyalaya where my father attended when he was a young schoolboy. Both my grandparents became school principals of the Halmilavawa Mahavidyalaya. And what I remember very distinctly was that through things like sports and music, how there is no differences, whether it's in class or socioeconomic background, and we enjoyed, though we came from the city, my father was living in Borel at the time, we got on very well, and I used to look forward to every trip that we made to Halmilavawa. So I must say that the village roots and Ananda College made me grounded in my future career in dealing with people from different areas of society.
Okay, good. Then can you recall how helpful your mother in doing all these things? Because your father has been very instrumental in getting you to Anand.
Yes.
But besides that, I am sure that your mother would have also been an inspirational character for you in your life as well. So just tell us something about her.
So my mother was far more competitive than my father. So my mother is the person who used to drive me for cricket practices, drive me for elocution, my music classes. And she's the one who would complain the most when I got my grades. So if I became third in the class, it was not good enough. I should have been second. If I became second in the class, it's not good enough. I should have been first. And several occasions, quite a few occasions, I was first in the class. No, you should have got more marks. Your average here should have been higher. or you should have been the first in all the parallel classes. So in a way, my mother was very demanding, but that also made me more competitive. I must say, I'm not sure whether I would want to bring up my children in a similar manner, but that inculcated in me both a sense of competition to try to become better, and in the other sense, when my studies started to suffer somewhat, when I started to play cricket, my father used to say, no, even to my mother, no, you must allow Puta to play cricket because that is what would make him a well-rounded person. And I'm very thankful for that, because I have sometimes seen parents who would tell their sons, don't play sports because you have to get so many distinctions in your O-levels or so many A's at your A-levels. And in my situation, as I started to play more and more cricket and got involved in things like debating in the school, I felt that balancing both sports and studies was quite a challenge, but I was happy I had parents who encouraged me in both areas.
Yeah, so you had, I think, both poles in line.
Yes.
One very contemplating in terms of studies, and one to safeguard your rights of doing other things.
Correct.
That's a very good balance of things one can have. Then tell us something about your sisters and brothers. Have you got?
Yes, I have a younger sister who went to ladies' college, the same school as my mother. She actually is an author. She has written 3 books. One of those books is used in the English literature stream at the University of Colombo. It's called Monsoons and Potholes. My brother, who was born the year I captained school in 1979, so he's 19 years my junior. He's a software engineer in the US.
Okay.
And I'm also married to a person from, my wife is from Ladies College, and I have 2 sons.
Okay.
My brother, of course, did not go to Ananda because at that time there was no primary school when we were looking at entering my brother to school, and he ended up going to St. Thomas's Prep. And my 2 children, rightly or wrongly, went to an international school. But in somewhere around 2007, when the war broke out, when the war had broken out, we moved to the US. I went with my children were quite young, and the rest of their schooling happened in the United States and in France.
Okay.
So both my boys are now in their 20s. They have their own business. They make mobile games and animation software, and they export it to the international markets.
Oh my God, yes.
So that's a little bit of background.
So just tell us something about your sister and the sister's work in the literary side of it.
So my sister's name is Manuka Wijesinghe, and she was a playwright and an author. And then later in life, which is quite interesting, she studied acupuncture, homeopathy and pranic healing. And she's married to a German, and today she has a license to practice alternative medicine in Germany. So that's who she is. But she recently published, I think, her 3rd or 4th book. I forget the title of the book, unfortunately, at this moment. And it was launched about 3 weeks ago, and it's available at the Vichitayapa bookstore. But the interesting thing is, my sister and I, though we are 4 years apart, as you mentioned earlier, my hobby is music, so I play a few instruments. And sometimes in my days that I was single, I used to use some of my sister's poems to write lyrics and write music. So she's the creative side of the family, whereas the 2 boys, my brother and I, we have more of a mathematical background.
All right, yes. So then, having spent that kind of a life and atmosphere from that village side of it, then you entered Ananda. So you started off your career all from grade 1, I hope, from Ananda. So you must be having some good childhood remembrance and early school days at Ananda. I think that was the time that Colonel G.W. Rajapaksa was the principal there. I think a lot of notable and quotable things are there, because we have recently launched a biography of Colonel G.W. Rajapaksa called Anandapati, written by old boy from Sisira, from Old Boys Association in Australia.
I was there at the launch.
You were there at the launch. So tell us something about your school days at Ananda, the best remembrance, and maybe goods, maybe notorious ones, but anything interesting.
So there were about 4 or 5 things that Ananda gave me. One was understanding aspects of good leadership. And Ananda thrived under Colonel Rajapaksa because of the exemplary leadership that he gave. That was a time where the school had tremendous discipline. I still recall the assembly period, the announcing that I used to give along with another illustrious Anandian, Ravinath Aryasinghe. And what I also remember is how Colonel Rajapaksa used to advise students and encourage various aspects of extracurricular activities at the school. The second thing that I remember the most is the impact of both Buddhism and studies. It was a time where Ananda had, at that time at least, of late I'm not so certain, but amongst the best teachers you can imagine. whether it is Mrs. Sumana De Silva for English, with whom I kept in touch with till she passed away at 102 years of age. I was there at her 100th birthday. Then Mrs. Tenakon.
Yes.
Then we had amongst the best maths teachers, Mr. Madhurama, who, thanks to whom I got a distinction at the O-level in mathematics. So I was privileged to have had the best teachers that education was able to make available. And then the next aspect is sports. Because I started playing cricket from the time I was 9 years old, there was at no point in time did I ever feel that there was unfairness, that there was that everyone was selected on merit. And I remember very clearly the leadership that was there for cricket, starting from the master in charge, at that time Mr. Ranjit Vitana, then we had Mr. Lionel Mendes, Mr. Bertie Wijesinghe. They did exemplary work in managing sports at the school, and we always had the right equipment. We were looked after well, even though we didn't have our own ground for most of the period till 1978 when we got the Ananda grounds. So that's another very fond memory. I, of course, remember the discipline inculcated by the likes of Mr. Lionel Mendes, where once we were going in a van for a cricket match, and then he was checking how long our hair was. And I had a little bit of hair coming over my ear, and he got me to get down from the van, get a haircut, and come for the match. But apart from that, what was more important is he taught us a dress code, how we should sit at a table and eat with other team members. And I thought that discipline was very useful because Ananda cricket was being followed by the whole country at that time. Because I think I'm very proud of one fact, that is, Ananda has produced more national cricketers than any other school in the world. The number is around 26, then followed by, I believe, Nalanda. And then, of course, the final aspect that the school had a huge impact on me is Buddhism. Starting with Vajra Buddhi Thera, Divyaga Yasassi Thera, whom I had the pleasure of meeting again about two years ago. And of course, I remember getting a distinction for Buddhism as well. So these 4 or 5 aspects have had a significant impact on my life, particularly because I eventually assumed positions of leadership, and I realized that when you lead, whether it's a public organization or a private organization, you must lead from example.
That's right. So during your time, of course, having been exposed to these kind of different, the right leadership, then mentoring and discipline and all that stuff, haven't you had anything to tell us about the bad side of it, like, where you got caught in something like that, where the present children can also take some good fund of it or good lessons out of it?
I think I can tell you one bad thing I did. I was in 1978, I received the American Field Service Scholarship, where you interview, and I think in the whole country 16 people were selected to spend 1 year in a high school following grade 12 in the United States, living with a family. So the moment I got the scholarship, I realized that I would still be underage to come back and captain the Ananda Nalanda cricket match in 1979.
Okay.
Now, the year I should have captained would have been 1978, and that was the 50th year. But in order to play in the 1979 match, I had to fail my A-levels. So I did something that I did regret, but later on I had no regrets because I still was able to captain the 50th Ananda Nalanda match. I intentionally failed my A-levels in order to stay an extra year in school without telling my teachers and without telling my parents.
Okay.
And when the results came, my father was so shocked. I wrote a long letter. At that time there was no email from the United States. I wrote a long letter saying, Tati, this is why I failed the exam. I hope you understand. Please forgive me. I said, I promise you one thing, that because I will somehow get myself educated, but allow me to captain the school. It was an ambition that I had.
Okay.
So probably I would encourage young people listening to this conversation, please communicate with your parents, right? I'm sure if I had communicated with my parents, they might have understood, but I was afraid that they would not want me to failed my A-levels intentionally with a view to captaining the school. So that's something that even my teachers were surprised. I remember this is Enivaratna sir. So I had to personally go and meet him, sir. It was not that, Thilan, we were using you as an example. Why did you do this? I said, sir, this was the reason. So that was a little bit of a bad side on my part.
Not a bad side of it, but I should say now in your corporate was a strategic move. Exactly. So to say, a strategic move to attain your ambitions. That's fine. But did Mr. Rajapaksa know about this story? Or?
I did tell him. And there was another reason. I forgot to tell you, Samita. I had to play the 6th big match in the series. I played 6 big matches in all, because I want to achieve the highest aggregate record in the Ananda match. I had only about 15 runs to get, which I did. Of course, subsequently those records have been broken. I think my record was broken by Avishka Gunawardena later in life. So those were the reasons where I thought to myself, no, I must captain the team in the 50th big match, which I did.
So which I rightly informed, just spread out that you have been very active in the cricketing field. And besides cricket, did you take part in any other sports?
No, none whatsoever. My father told me, do well in one sport.
Okay.
So if at all I did any other extracurricular activity, I did scouting and I did English debating.
Okay.
And I would again encourage young people, the communication skill, the ability to think on your feet, ability to communicate in English and Sinhala both is extremely important, and I'm very, very thankful to my father for having encouraged me to enter into the debating team.
Yeah. And who were your contemporaries during your time at Ananda? Now doing well in the society, I mean, looking after various aspects in their different spheres, maybe in engineering, maybe academic, maybe in armed forces, or maybe legal
most
field.
of them don't give publicity to themselves, but the names that come to my mind, for example, Mahendra Dasanayaka, he holds 26 patents in the United States for lighting technology for automotives, for automobiles. Then you have Kamal Premaratna, with whom I used to fight for the first place, who is now a professor of, I believe, mathematics and physics in the University of Miami. We are all part of a WhatsApp group. Then you have Mr. Lalit Thapangama, who is running a business empire. I still remember during the time I was chairman of the board of investment, every year or other year, Lalit used to come and sign 1 or 2 agreements to expand his business. And he's self-made, even though his father had a smaller business. Today, he's running a $250 million a year business empire. So in my batch, we had everyone from sports people to engineers to accountants to entrepreneurs.
That's right.
And they're scattered throughout the world. Actually, I believe it's only a minority of my classmates who may still be, or a major portion of my classmates are overseas. Okay. In fact, I met some of my old schoolmates in Sydney recently when I was there. Rasika Ananda, who's running his own accounting firm. So we do keep in touch, but I wish I could have kept more in touch with them, because I also had stints of living overseas, particularly the 5.5 years I spent going to university in the US. I lost touch with quite a few of the old Anandians, but thanks to email, thanks to social media, I managed to reconnect with quite a few people. Yes.
Okay. So now, having spent this illustrious career at Ananda in the sports arena, and then having got this, I think you were the first to take this American Field Scholarship from Ananda, followed by Ravinath Aresing, if I remember right.
In the subsequent year, yes.
Yeah, if I remember, because that was our time. And I can still remember that when he was given this chance and there was assembly and all that, we were very highly taken up. Oh my God, it's going to US. So, having spent that kind of this one, then you embarked on your higher studies out of Ananda, and I think you have had an illustrious career in your higher studies as well. If I remember
yes.
going through your CV, that you have had 3 bachelor's degrees in 3 different spheres. So, what made you to go into that kind of arrangement?
So, the first point was that I wanted to keep my promise to myself and my father that I'll be educated. Right, so I somehow did well in the United States in the year I spent there, and I got a full scholarship initially to start my university career at the State University of New York. Now, as I was getting ready to go, I had several of people saying, Thilan, please don't go, because in another few years Sri Lanka will get test status, and just like you broke the opening batting record for the Ananda Nalanda with Siddharth Vettaman, you must one day open for Sri Lanka in test cricket. And in fact, I had Mr. Kili Rajamahendran of Maharajas, who offered me a job, a very good salary, to stay back in Sri Lanka. And I still remember to this day talking to Mr. Rajamahendran, who was a great patron of cricket, who helped, I think he was one of the key people who helped Mr. Gamini Disanayaka get us test status in 82. He again said, Thilan, you have a fantastic future in cricket. Don't go to the US because there is no cricket in the US. I told him, sir, no, I have given a commitment to myself that I want to qualify. And after all, there is no certainty when we will get test cricket. And I have already received a scholarship, but I'm going. He said, okay, if that is your wish. He gave me a small cash present which lasted a long time, and I went to the US. And after, actually, I must say that the AFS scholarship is what convinced me to seek higher education, because during that period I would have visited about 20 universities, because my family that I lived in the US was also entering university. And when I saw these higher seats of learning and the choice of subject matters that were available for learning, the urging or the desire to learn more was higher than the desire to play cricket. As a 19-year-old when I first went to university. So then I transferred to Cornell University, and by the end of the 5th year of my university studies, I qualified with a Bachelor of Science in Industrial Engineering, a Bachelor of Arts in Economics, and a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration. Of course, a third degree in Economics was an afterthought because of my love for mathematics, so I specialized in econometrics. And then after I finished my studies in the US, though I had 1 or 2 job offers, I decided to come back, mainly because I promised my father I'll come back and look after my brother. My father was actually working in Nigeria at the time. And secondly, I wanted to rekindle my love for cricket. Okay. So I came back.
So you came back. So during our studies in US, all this one, so haven't you had any exposure to go into any other fields other than the academy? No, academia is, of course, you have 3 basic degrees. So the natural thing would have been to go from MPhil or Masters and then go for the higher ups and then ended up with a PhD or something like that. So you didn't have that kind of a aspiration, but you go lateral.
I had actually zero aspiration of going for a master's or a PhD, because I realized I would end up becoming more theoretical. I wanted to get my hands dirty, literally, either running a company or running a business.
Okay.
And I always had a love for mathematics and finance. So in my mind, I knew one day I would be in some sort of a financial field, even though I studied engineering. And engineering again was a more result of tradition within my family, having been born into a family of engineers. Okay. But in actual practice, my first job was at PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers. And I built the industrial engineering practice, a consulting practice, but I must have practiced engineering for less than a year. And then I moved on to strategy consulting, and then banking, and then subsequently.
Right. So they immediately coming back from US, having attained all these the basic the bachelor's qualifications. What was your the first job like?
The first job was in the consulting practice of PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Okay.
And I picked that job, even though I had a job at Bank of America at that time as well. I picked the job because I realized I could work flexible hours, so that I can scoot off to the cricket grounds at about 3:30, 4 o'clock for practices, and then come back in the night and finish my work, because I was in the consulting practice. So so that's how I ended up having the time to get back into cricket. So I think I trained for a further 3 years. I rejoined the same club. In fact, this is a very interesting story. I'm again thankful to my father for this. At the age of 15, my father was told, Thilan must play club cricket because it will help him improve his school cricket. And my father took me to the Oval and said, son, I'm enrolling you at the Tamil Union Cricket Club because it's very close to the house my parents lived in. And from the time I was 15 years old, I got a place in the Division 1 Sara Trophy team. I scored 100 in Division 1 when at the age of 15 years. But what is important is that I got so used to the Oval grounds. It was my home ground, and that is what helped me achieve the aggregate record in both the Ananda and the 50-over match series and the Ananda and the series, and score 100 and several 50s in the big match series. So to this day, I'm thankful to my father, and after I finished my university studies, having not even touched a bat for 5 years, because of my gratitude towards the Tamil Union Club, where I faced absolute no discrimination, even though when I joined the club, I was only one with a Sinhalese name in 1975, and they welcomed me with open arms. Some of the cricketers who played at that time when I was a 15-year-old schoolboy, to this date are my personal friends, like Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy, who became a governor, Mr. Skanda Kumar, who was an eminent ambassador and the former chairman of George Stewart's. So I went back to the club, trained for another 3 years, and in 91-92 I captained the Sri Lanka A team.
Okay.
So I was at that time fighting for the opening berth. So I was, funnily enough, I was fighting for the opening berth in the national team with another Anandian, Chandika Wijesinghe.
Okay.
And we were partners at the same club, Tamil Union. He and I used to open batting together. But he's I think 8 years younger than me, so he got the national spot. I was given the second prize, which was captaining the Sri Lanka A team.
Okay.
And in 92, I ended at my cricket because I became a partner in an investment banking business, and I stopped the game at that time.
Okay.
So,
but you started off your first house in cricket at Ananda, then the Tamil Union. So, but having played Tamil Union, are you still involved in the cricket as a player in that aspect?
So I had one stint as a cricket administrator when I served in the interim committee of the Sri Lanka cricket in 1999, and if I may say this without sounding like I am bragging, a key contribution I made when Sri Lanka, as a recognition of Sri Lanka having won the World Cup in '96, it was myself that I went to my board of directors of the BOI, and we carved out a portion of the Pallakale free trade zone and gave it as a free gift to the cricket board. So today the Pallakale cricket grounds is because of an action that I took, because somebody, I believe it was then Minister Lakshman Kiriyalla, I heard him give a speech saying, oh, we need to do something about the fact that the Askiria grounds in Kandy is not of international test standard. So then, when I heard that speech, I went back to the office at the BOI and said, can we carve out a portion right at the entrance? So my zone director at the Board of Investment said, yes sir, we can do it. So I got the permission of the then president and handed over the grounds as a free grant. And then also during my time at Katunayak and Biyagama, we built cricket grounds for the community using public sector money during my days as chairman BOI. And then of course we were removed, because of cricket politics. All of us were removed from the interim committee. But that's after
that's
that.
That's kind of a bad patch that we should not touch on.
After that I decided to myself that I will not be a part of cricket administration, but I continue to be a life member at the Tamil Union, and I'm currently serving on the committee of the Tamil Union.
Okay, right. You still have your lives wires there.
And if I may add, 2 years ago, I started to play cricket again after a 27-year gap when I got an invitation from another old Anandian, Mahesh D'Souza, to join the Masters Cricket Academy. So I am now again playing
at Tamil Union again, is it?
No, we practice in various places.
Okay.
It's a club of people who are generally over.
It's a freelance
50.
kind of a club.
Yeah, generally everyone is over 50, some are over 60, some are over 65. We meet occasionally, play a few matches.
Okay.
So right. that helps me stay in shape, and it's a motivation for me to, as we are no longer young.
So having now, yes, you have touched upon during your just few minutes ago your involvement with BOI. So that is why I am going to come now, Thilan, because having studied there, coming here, involved in the private sector activities, you started getting into the state mechanism by way of taking responsibilities at the helm. So tell us something about how you got involved with the state administration, so to say.
It happened entirely by accident, and this is something very few people know about. So in 1992, I co-founded a company called Asia Capital, which in 94 went public as an investment bank, and it became very successful. We became the largest stockbroker in Sri Lanka and the largest investment bank. And we used to also attract at Asia Capital a lot of private capital to come into the country, into the stock market, as well as foreign direct investment. So we became well known. And then one day, somewhere in June or July 1995, the then Secretary to the Treasury called me and said, Thilan, I want to come to your house. So I thought, Mr. S. Javardhan, I thought, I mean, I'm a very small person. Why would such somebody so important want to come to my residence? So I gave him direction. Mr. S. Javardhan came and said, I have been asked by the President, Chandrika Bandara Kumaratunga, to recommend 4 or 5 names for the position of the Chairman BOI. Your name is one of them because I have been observing you. I listened to some of your speeches as an Executive Director of Asia Capital, and you will be called for an interview. Please go for the interview. So 2 weeks later, I get a call to say the President wants to interview me. And she also told me, you're the 4th person I'm interviewing for this position. And she asked me various questions about myself. And that was the first time I have ever met Chandrika Kumaratunga one-on-one. I have met her at several other functions, but I had no family connection or any political connection. My father was a professional engineer, as you know. And then she said, would you like to be chairman of the BOI? And then she said, then I said, can I think about it? I'd like to speak to my wife and I want to think about it and I want to speak to my board of directors because I would have to do this full time. Yeah. Then she said, no, I will match what you're getting in the private sector. So then she asked me how much am I earning in the private sector. Then I saw her eyebrows go up and said, oh, that's a little high. Then I think this is something that I'd like to share. I was asked the most intelligent question I believe I have ever been asked at an interview. She asked me, Thilan, how much do you need to live? So I said, Madam, I have not bought my house as yet. I have enough shareholding in the company which is worth quite a lot of money. My house rent currently is 40,000 rupees. I can live on 60,000. 100,000 rupee salary. Okay, agreed. You leave all your private sector positions. So I left every position, every directorship, every executive position I held. Full time came into the Board of Investment in September 1995. And then there was a parliamentary debate. I was 35 years old. There was a parliamentary debate as to why this person called Thilan Wijesinghe was being paid 3 times the salary of the president and 4 times the salary of, again, my predecessor. And of course, the questions were answered that is because we wanted to attract somebody from the private sector. So there was a lot of pressure on me to perform. But I'm happy to say the 5.5 years I served as Chairman BOI, I don't have to talk about what I achieved, but there is enough recognition that I did something. And I'm proud that I had the opportunity at that time, at a time where we had a war, to contribute something to this country's economic growth.
Okay. So, I don't want to just ask, like you rightly said, you are not a person who would like to blow your own trumpet many a time. So, but having said that, but for the national importance, I'm telling you again. So, anything significant that you have contributed to BOI to make the investment atmosphere in Sri Lanka a vibrant and sustainable, because that is what is not we are seeing at the moment, unfortunately.
Okay. So 2 months into my position, I realized that the Board of Investment incentives were not adequate, and we introduced a new series of incentives. For example, for the first time, to encourage the mini hydro sector, right? For the first time, to recognize warehousing and logistics as an important sector, to recognize software development, whether it's local market or export market. So we came up within 2 months of my joining the BOI with a new set of incentives. Then I had the privilege of being involved in state enterprise reform. I was chairman of a committee that helped the Public Enterprise Reform Commission to privatize telecom. We had a dynamic minister in the form of Mangala Samarivira, and one of the first things we did was brought in competition. So I signed the agreement for Lanka Bell, I signed the BOI agreement for Suntel, that created competition. Then through a transparent process, we privatized Sri Lanka Telecom. And then suddenly what happened was that at that time there was a 2.5 year waiting period. Young people will not know, there was a 2.5 year waiting period for a fixed telephone, right? And that started the boom of the telecommunication industry and the software industry. So that's one achievement. The second thing I'm proud of is we had a shortage of software engineers at that time. I asked the industry software association at the time, they said we have 600 vacancies, universities are graduating only 200. Then I went and told this to the president. And the president said, Thilan, you need to talk to somebody called Dr. Lalit Gamage. So Dr. Gamage and I got together, and that's how we started SLIIT, SLIT, Sri Lanka Institute of Information Technology. So I'm still on the board as a founder member, as a co-founder of SLIIT. And today, 23 years later, we have 12,500 students, and we account for almost 50% of IT degrees. So telecom privatization and the commencement of SLIIT, eliminating customs duties on all telecommunication and computer equipment, that laid the foundation for the exponential growth of the software industry. So that's something I am very proud of, having been part of a team. And finally, if I may blow my own trumpet, at that time we were encouraging export-oriented growth, and we felt that there wasn't enough export processing zones with all the infrastructure, what we call plug and play. You come, you build your factory, all the infrastructure connections are at the periphery of the site, right? Because when you go outside the zones, you have to deal with local government, there's not enough electricity, not enough water. So during my period at the BOI, we built 7 new industrial zones, what we call export processing zones. Sitawaka, Horana, Vatupettivela, Malwatta, Mirijavila, Polgavela, all these zones were built during the period I was chairman of the BOI. So these are some of the achievements, but I must say that if I didn't have the support of my board of directors, and again I'm thankful to President Kumaratunga having given a very dynamic board of directors, because after 6 months I said, Madam, I can't work with this board, I want another board. Then she said, whom do you want? I said, I want Deputy Secretary to the Treasury, Dr. P.B. Jayasundara. Of course, he has now spoiled his name a bit. I said, I want Secretary Industries, I want Secretary Public Administration, and I want Chairman of 8 Conspence, Mr. Michael Mack. She immediately called her secretary, dictated a letter, asked the current board to resign. I mean, I was only 35 years old. And it is that board that gave me the confidence. And then, because I had the treasury representative on the board, all of the money that was required to build all these free trade zones and provide various other infrastructure facilities to the industries became possible. And another statistic I'm proud of is that 1998 or 97 or 98 was the year in which Sri Lanka has attracted the highest ever level of net foreign investment inflows as a percentage of GDP, 2.8%. Even after the war ended, we hardly achieved even 1%. At the moment, we are less than 0.5%. So those are some of the things that we did as a team. I don't want to take singular credit. And one more point I think that is important is, during that time we pioneered public-private partnerships. From power sector, the mini hydro sector, hospitals, affordable housing, telecommunication. The first ever port terminal PPP, SAGT, was done during that time, and that's what made the Colombo port a hub port. So these are things we enjoyed doing at that time, and we had the support of the Secretary to the Treasury, the government, and there was no criticism. Nobody went on strike because we privatized telecom or privatized gas. Shell terminal was brought in during my time. Of course, subsequent governments took the Shell terminal back, and that became Litro. Today, if Shell owned that particular terminal, we wouldn't have a gas shortage or a dollar shortage.
So these are some of the things that, of course, in your credentials, and
these policies were subsequently reversed, Samita.
Yeah.
Again, I prefer to talk statistics rather than talking of individuals. The period from 1995 to 2002 was the only period Sri Lanka didn't go for an IMF structural adjustment program. Why? Because we reformed the public sector, we reformed state-owned enterprises, we encouraged private sector, we encouraged exports. Despite having a war, we had economic fundamentals that had made us have enough foreign exchange, because exports was, as a percentage of GDP, was 33%. Okay. Today it's 15%. So we forgot about economic reform, and from 2005 onwards we closed the economy, became more and more protective. And people talk of neoliberalism versus import substitution. No, the fact of the matter is, Sri Lanka being a small island, we must be open to the world. Let's take free trade agreements. I was part of the negotiating team that negotiated the Indo-Lanka Free Trade Agreement. That was in 1998. 1999 to 2004, the 5 years after the Indo-Lanka Free Trade Agreement was signed, exports to India under the preferential tariffs went from $50 million to $500 million.
Exports from Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka to India went from tenfold increase of exports from Sri Lanka to India in the first 5 years after the free trade agreement. But some people argue and say, oh no, but India also exported a lot. Yes, India is exporting a lot to Sri Lanka, but they are outside the preferential tariff items. They don't get preferential tariff. When Maruti cars or Leyland buses come, normal customs duty is applicable.
Yeah.
So anyway, the overall trade balance has been in favor of India. But if you take the trade balance of items under the preferential tariff, Sri Lanka virtually has a positive trade balance with India. So these are small aspects that are not understood.
Yeah.
Right? We have the least number of free trade agreements of any country in South Asia or East Asia, and that is why there's a shortage of foreign exchange. That is why there's not enough foreign direct investment. That is why we are, as a nation, are begging to send our workers to work in menial jobs to earn remittances. That is not a way to develop the country.
Yeah, yeah. I think one thing that is notable and quotable at this point of time is, Thilan, that you have this, you are pioneered the concept of PPP, and that's a feather on your hat, of course, because at that time nobody thought that there would be some model like this, but that made me a lot of changes in the dynamics of economic dynamics in Sri Lanka, and also the sustainability of some of these things. And rightly you said the Sri Lanka Telecom is a classic example, and there are no strikes, and it's growing from pillar to post like it's nothing. So this is where I would like to take you to a different direction altogether, Thilan, because now I think there's a lot more things which I think would be disseminated to us during your oration on 29th of October. But before that, and how do you find your acquaintance with the Ananda College OBA after leaving school and then being in US for some time and coming back to Sri Lanka? Any way?
I must express my regret that it has not been that deep, but I have been involved in the 75-80 group in a peripheral way, partly because I had stints living overseas, and then the pressure of work. I know that is not an excuse, but I have had, prior to my moving the family to the US, quite a bit of involvement with the old Anandayans cricket wing.
Okay.
So I played a role together with my old coach, Mr. Anurudha Polonnovita, in actually improving the turf, the entire working with the cricket board, where Mr. Nishanda Ranatung was also in the cricket board, in improving the cricket grounds, making it fully green again. But unfortunately, 1 or 2 years later, it went into rack and ruin again because the Ananda College didn't maintain it well. I also organized a particular big match, and I am proud to say that particular big match, I think I earned for the school about 7-8 times more than the previous big match. So it's not been consistent, Samita, unfortunately, but I sort of wait to my help to be asked as opposed to being volunteering. But maybe as I grow older and I quietly, at the moment I run my own business, but at some point I'll certainly contribute a lot more to the school.
Yeah, that's a good news for the people who are reading and listening on this one. Resource person is available. You can sort any assistance, and I can tell you, out of my any convictions or obligations, that he's been such a lovely and a very enthusiastic person. The moment we want to get him on for this one, he was readily very receptive and saying that he would take the chance of doing the oration this time. That's something that we would always love of an Anandian. Anyway.
But I must say, where I volunteer, a lot of my time is giving career guidance. So I get invited quite a bit to young graduates. I have given speeches to many young graduates, or even people who are going to school on what to expect in a career, how you can groom yourself, how you can ready yourself to the job market or becoming an entrepreneur. So that's something I have always volunteered and done.
Okay, so now just coming back from this hustle and bustle of life, corporate world, governance, and you call it strategic thinking, and then education and all that. Tell us something about aesthetic life. Touch on music.
Yes, so music is a hobby.
And just to interrupt you, because I think you have won the Golden Cliff Award for folk music, 1991.
Yes, so I have always been able to play by ear, because on my mother's side, her father and my granduncles were very musical. So every Sunday, at least 2 Sundays a month, about 6 or 7 of my granduncles, I had about 8 granduncles, used to come and one would play the piano, the other one would play the accordion, the other one would play the mouth organ, and I used to watch and learn the chords by watching. And then I used to play by ear. Then I taught myself to play the guitar and the harmonica. But when I was in university, because that was a period during the Southern JVP uprising where artists, playwrights, authors were getting killed for their own beliefs. And I got on a stage and I sang this song against those who were being burnt in tires, because even though there was terrorism, when it comes to state-sponsored terrorism, it is something that nobody should tolerate. There will always be terrorists in the world. But when the state behaves like a terrorist, then that is something that I spoke against. So this particular song, I wrote the lyrics incorporating a poem written by my sister. I wrote the tune. It won the Golden Clef original song of the year, and I occasionally perform it.
Yeah.
But I mean for concerts for charity. But in the last 10 years or so, I have not performed.
But in 2001, you have produced a musical album as well, I think.
Yes, so I have written about 10-11 songs, and including about 3 of my own songs. We created a band called Alien Accent. So they were, not necessarily from Ananda, and I met them actually at a talent show, and we raised some money. I also put some money. We went to Los Angeles in a studio belonging to a Sri Lankan with some of the top session musicians in Los Angeles. We recorded this album, and it's all in English, all original music, and it sold about 3,000 copies. And we launched it in 2001. We had 3 sold-out concerts at the Bishop's College Auditorium. And if you anybody googling Alien Accent can still listen to some of this music.
Okay.
So my music I have not published yet. Maybe that's one of the things I need to do before I go to my next life.
Okay, so we have just got some information previously about the wife, the children, and all that. So your wife is also employed or a housewife?
When my second child was born, even though my wife has a SEMA qualification and is a chartered secretary, she decided to devote full time to bringing up the children. So she is a housewife.
Yeah, okay. That's a commendable and a very high level of, satisfaction. Yes, okay. So having gone through the mill of life so far, Thilan, now what is and achieved a vast experience and exposure and all recognitions locally and globally both. So what is your stake, or what is your giving to the present day Anandians?
I would like
including the young old Anandians as well.
I would like to play a role in, I will touch on this subject in my speech. Sri Lanka is going through an unprecedented economic crisis. Now, we might ask, Thilan, would you like to go back into public service? I don't believe that just one person, Thilan Wijesinghe or Samita, one of us going into government will solve the problem, because this particular problem has been in the making for 15 to 20 years due to lack of reform, wrong economic model, wrong economic thinking, mismanagement, corruption. So really, I would like to see whether, just as much as when Ananda was founded, the principles on which Ananda was founded was essentially be open to all religions, though it was a Buddhist school. Ananda has a culture and a background of encouraging open thinking. I would like Ananda to be the conduit of producing the sort of leaders and the thinking in order for us to first understand why we ended up in this particular situation where our economy has actually gone back 10 years. Our GDP per capita has contracted by 25%. The economy has contracted 8% this year. Yeah. To understand this and what is it that we can do to come out of it. And for us to come out of it, there has to be an attitude change. There has to be a change in mindset. There has to be a change in work ethic. There has to be a change in the way the bureaucracy is run. We have to bring back the dignity of a ministry secretary. We can't have politicians who barely have an O-level qualification being effective CEOs of government ministries. We have to strengthen the public service. We have to strengthen institutions, and we have to have political reforms. And an overall change in attitude that ultimately we must be self-reliant without relying on the government for a handout or a dole, because everybody is gaming the system. We have got used to living beyond our means. I used to always say for the last 10-15 years, appreciate the work done by those who go to the Middle East and send remittances or from wherever, because I used to say that our standard of living is maintained by that. Because we have not worked hard enough to export, we have not worked hard enough to attract foreign investment, we have not worked hard enough to save foreign exchange. But we were relying on this easy thing called exporting of primary commodities like tea, rubber and coconut and remittances. Right? So as a country, we have to evolve into a much more modern level of thinking. Of course, the software industry has played a role. So if there's one industry that has evolved successfully in the last 20 years, it's a software export industry, which went from nothing to $1.5 billion. And you know why that happened? Because the government didn't know how to interfere with our brain. Because in every sphere of life, the government likes to interfere. Oh, we will give you a subsidy. We'll give you a government job. We'll give you a deal where you can make some money under the table in the wrong way and come and share it with whoever the people who are giving you this deal. Right? But it is people like the software industry who use their brains, who said, we don't care what government is there because we will use our brain, export our product and earn foreign exchange for the country.
That's right.
And that is the sort of spirit that we as a people have to have, not just in software. We need to become a country that exports agriculture. I was in Australia last week talking to a company that was started by a Sri Lankan who graduated in food science from Peradeniya University, who has built a multi-billion rupee export business exporting organic foods. $50 million worth of exports from Sri Lanka alone, in addition to other countries like Philippines, etc. Right? That is the sort of spirit we need to encourage in this country. And to do that, you can't be a country of subsidies and handouts. We have to be a country that people aspire to be an entrepreneur, aspire to not become a politician or do a tender or some other deal. Right? So we have lived beyond our means. So it is time, I feel that if I were to give something back, I'd like to give something back to Ananda, and that is, I might touch on this on my speech, every Anandian should have a basic knowledge of economics. Every Anandian, regardless of whether you become a doctor or an engineer or an accountant or whatever, had to have a basic knowledge of entrepreneurship. Okay. We must encourage Anandians to actually interact with the private sector while in school. We must encourage not just Anandians but all school children to become self-reliant. And it is only that way, just as much as we produce the best cadets in the world, the best armed forces in Sri Lanka, Ananda has produced, we are now producing the best entrepreneurs. But unfortunately, we have not produced the best economic thinkers yet.
Yet to come.
Yet to come. And that is why let's start with the school.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I think we have just completed a very, a very interesting, vibrant and depth kind of an interview. I don't say an interview, but a very casual chat with Thilan Wijesinghe. I think we started off with his the childhood, time at college, then his time with the universities in USA, then coming back to Sri Lanka, about the corporate world involvements, and then his spearheading the BOI, then giving birth to this PPP concept, and also giving a bit of advice to the young Anandians who are coming out of school to think what is expected out of them to get this country moving without going on a begging ball. So with that note, I would like to conclude this chat with Thilan. Thank you so much for your time, and you have been always very, very, very hospitable in giving your time, because hospitable doesn't mean that you are giving something to eat only, but time is also very valuable and it's money basically. But very hospitable in giving your time, and also giving your space and everything to make this interview a very, very successful and a meaningful one. So thank you so much, and wish you all the best, and may the blessings of Mother Ananda be with you all times, Thilan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you very much.